So today we're going to dive into a tension that sits right at the very heart of Australia. It's this idea that the nation operates under two completely different legal systems. You've got the modern state law that most people are familiar with, and then you have the ancient, continuous, customary law of its first peoples.
Okay, so let's just get right to the big question, the one that really frames this entire story. What actually happens when a legal tradition that stretches back over 60,000 years smashes into one that's only a couple of centuries old? Well, the answer is messy, it's complicated, and it's shaping the idea of justice in Australia every single day. You see, Australia is what you'd call a place of legal pluralism. It means that alongside the federal and state laws that are written down in books, you have the living, breathing, customary laws of over 300 different Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations. And look, it is so important to get this. We're not talking about one single monolithic indigenous law. It's a rich mosaic of hundreds of distinct traditions and social norms, each one deeply, deeply connected to a specific place.
So to really get a handle on where these two systems clash, we first have to understand what customary law is built on. The best way to think about it is like a three-legged stool. Each leg is absolutely essential for balance, and those legs are kinship, country, and the law.
First up, kinship. And I mean, this is so much more than a simple family tree. It's your entire social universe. It's this incredibly intricate web of relationships that dictates who you are, what your responsibilities are, and who you're connected to. For example, in many cultures, your mother's sister isn't your aunt, she's also considered your mother. And her kids, they're your siblings. This isn't just a quaint way of speaking. It comes with real, lifelong obligations for care and support that go both ways.
The second leg is country. And again, you kind of have to throw out the Western idea of land as just a piece of property that you can buy and sell. In this worldview, country is a living, breathing entity. It's the land, the rivers, the sky, the stories, the ancestors, all of it. People don't own country, they belong to it. Their number one job isn't to possess it, but to care for it. It's a sacred duty, a custodial responsibility passed down through countless generations.
And the thing holding it all together is the law. Now, this isn't a set of statutes you can look up in a library. The law flows from the dreaming, that foundational creation time that explains how the world and everything in it came to be. It's the ultimate spiritual authority that lays out all the rules for how kinship, country, and the community are supposed to work together to keep the world in balance. So, when that balance gets broken, resolving a dispute is all about restoring it. And the traditional ways of doing that are fascinatingly direct. You have things like avoidance. Just moving your camp is a really powerful, nonverbal way of saying, hey, there's a problem here we need to deal with. Or a public airing of a grievance. It's not about humiliating someone, it's about using the whole community to help guide people back to the right path. Of course, elders and senior kin are constantly mediating. And, while it might be jarring to us now, physical violence could be a recognized, structured way to settle a serious issue once and for all, often overseen by family to make sure it didn't blow up into something bigger.
All right, so you've got this ancient, complex system focused on community harmony. Now, let's see what happens when it slams head-on into the Australian state's legal framework. This is where the story gets really complicated, and it becomes one of collision, alienation, and some pretty fraught attempts at adaptation.
This quote from the Australian Law Reform Commission it nails the impact perfectly. For so many Indigenous people, a mainstream courtroom is culturally alienating. I mean, just imagine it for a second. You're in a totally foreign environment, being judged by a system where your deepest obligations to your family are irrelevant, your spiritual connection to land is just dismissed, and the authority of your own law is completely invisible. The end result is just this profound sense of powerlessness.
Now, to be fair, there have been attempts to bridge this gap. The state has created some specialist courts, like the Koori Court in Victoria. And in these courts, you'll have respected community elders sitting at the table with the magistrate giving cultural advice on sentencing. It definitely makes the whole process feel less intimidating. But, and this is a huge but, this only happens after someone has already pleaded guilty under Australian state law. So customary law is being consulted, yeah, but the final ultimate authority, it still rests 100% with the state.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, because this slide reveals a massive contradiction baked right into Australian law. Just look at this. On one hand, you have the Federal Crimes Act, which flat out forbids a court from using customary law if it might lessen the seriousness of a crime. Okay. But then on the other hand, you've got the Succession Act in New South Wales, which actually allows courts to use a community's laws, customs, and traditions to figure out who should inherit property when there's no will. So the state pushes custom away in criminal law, but pulls it in when it's convenient for civil law.
This isn't just some weird legal quirk, you know? It points to something much, much deeper. It points to a fundamental clash between two entirely different worldviews, one that's searching for harmony and another that's looking for a final settlement.
Let's actually break this down, because the differences are night and day. Customary processes, they're all about the group, about fixing relationships to bring the community back into balance. The process is usually public, because when there's a problem, it affects everyone. The Western model, though, is all about the individual. The process is formal, it's private, and confidentiality is king. So think about that. One system believes that airing a problem out in the open is the only way to heal, while the other believes that keeping it behind closed doors is the absolute gold standard. They're not even aiming for the same thing. One wants reconciliation, the other wants a legally binding agreement.
So how in the world do you build a bridge across a gap that wide? Well, the conversation is slowly starting to shift away from just tinkering with the state system to make it fit better. It's moving towards a much bigger and much more challenging idea, genuine recognition. And that brings up the critical question of who actually gets to drive that change.
This slide really lays out the two different paths forward. On one side, you have those state-led models we talked about, like the Corey courts. In that model, custom gets treated as a cultural fact that can help inform the state's decision. But the power, the authority, never leaves the state system. Then, on the other side, you have community-led initiatives, like the Yuendamu Mediation and Justice Committee. This is a Warply-run program. It doesn't ask the state for permission. It draws its power directly from its own traditional law and cultural authority to solve conflicts on its own terms.
And you might be asking, okay, that sounds great in theory, but do these community-led initiatives actually work? Well, the results are not just philosophical, they are powerfully economic. A formal analysis of that Yuendamu program found that for every single dollar invested, the community got a return of $4.30 in social value. Just an incredible return, mostly from things like less contact with the police and better community health. So if we look at what makes these community programs work so well, experts have come up with some pretty clear principles for any outsiders trying to engage. And this isn't just about being polite, this is about being effective. It starts with simple respect for protocols. It means getting that consultation isn't a one-off meeting you can just tick off a list, it's an ongoing conversation. It means you have to recognize Indigenous authority, and that means allowing time for the community to talk amongst themselves, which often takes way longer than you think. And maybe most important of all, it means you have to build relationships first, because if there's no trust, nothing else is going to happen.
Which brings us all the way back to the biggest question of all, the one that really sits at the heart of this entire explainer. Is the goal of true justice just to tweak the dominant system so it can better accommodate the other one? Or is it something way more profound? Is it about creating a future where the legitimacy and the authority of both legal systems are fully recognized, standing side by side? That, right there, is the fundamental challenge that Australia is still working to answer.